Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, broadcasting live every Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Central from Panama City Beach, Florida, home of the world's most beautiful beaches. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining me on my weekly broadcast. Every week, I'll feature some of the best instructors, coaches, authors, and entrepreneurs in the golf business today. I begin with a great discussion on Coach's Corner, followed by an insightful interview with my special guest. So let's get started by introducing tonight's Coach's Corner panel. All right, good evening, everybody. And once again, thank you for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. And just as the intro said, we're going to start off with Coach's Corner here in just a moment, and I'll introduce the guys in just a little bit. And then a little bit later on, I'm going to be joined by my special guest, Tim Kremer, the president and founder of Peak Performance Mind Coaching. He'll be joining me on the second half of the show, and I'm really excited to have him back. And he's also been pretty active as well over the years on the panel as the two gentlemen are on here tonight. So really excited to have all of these guys on the show tonight, and we're going to get started here in just a minute. But let me remind everybody, Golf Talk Live is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. iGolf Sports Network is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing top quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, offers reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top PGA and LPGA teaching professionals, all designed to help improve your game from tee to green. So subscribe today at golftipsmag.com. All right. As I mentioned, we're going to start off with Coach's Corner, and let me just introduce the guys, and then I will bring them on, and we'll get into tonight's discussion. First up, of course, is Pete Buchanan. He is the founder and director of instruction and owner of Plain Simple Golf, LLC. It houses the Plain Simple Golf circuit and the Simple Swing repeater training brace, and Pete's been teaching for over the past 30-plus years. Also joining on the panel is Bill Abrams, PGA professional and the 2017 and 18 Central Illinois PGA Teacher of the Year. He's also the 2015 Illinois PGA Professional of the Year and 2019 Illinois PGA Teacher of the Year. And he's also the owner, director of instruction at Golf Solutions Academy at Balmoral Woods in Crete, Illinois. And in the cooler months, you might find him down at Grand Palms Resort in Pembroke Pines, Florida. So, guys, welcome to Coach's Corner. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Ted, thanks as always for having us.
I appreciate that. So let's just do sort of a quick catch up. As I'm sure the listeners all know, we've got a lot going on right now around the globe, and particularly here in the United States with the pandemic that we're dealing with. So I just thought, we talked off air just briefly, and I was kind of asking you guys, where things sort of stand as far as teaching and that sort of thing, given our current circumstances. So, Pete, why don't you just give a quick recap what's going on in your neck? First off, where are you so that the folks know, and just kind of what's happening in your area as far as golf is concerned, playing and even instruction. And then, Bill, I'll get you to do the same before we get into the discussion. And I'm assuming, Pete, have you got on mute?
There it is. There I am. Thank you, Ted.
No problem.
For having me on. And looking forward to it, Bill. In this area of St. Louis, that's where I'm at. The golf courses have been open. They each have their own stipulations. I know some of the private clubs aren't allowing any guests. We have the particular golf course that I teach at has, single carts, or you can walk, keeping your distances. The shop itself is closed up, so they have an area where you can go to. The range has been open, and lessons have been few and far between, but May 1st, everything's starting to move and turn around. So, it's just going through the protocols of keeping your distance, watching what you're doing, and, go ahead and, give the lessons. And it's a little bit different, from what it was before, but, we'll all find ways to get it done and get out on the golf course some too, which is a nice way to get it done, some playing lessons and those things. So, we've been fortunate to be able to do some things. I know some other states haven't, but
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully now we've turned the corner and everything's going to be moving along.
Yeah, it's certainly going to take a little bit, I'm sure, before we get back to some sort of a sense of normalcy. But it's nice to hear that some of my fellow professionals are able to start moving in a more forward momentum, I guess. Bill, what about yourself? I know we talked off air, but maybe just let the folks know where you are. I'm assuming you're back up north now. But what's been happening in your neck of the woods as far as the courses are concerned, and how have you been adapting so far with some of the restrictions?
Yeah, Illinois just reopened golf on May 1st on Friday, and they have some very, very strict regulations, only twosomes, walking, 15-minute tee time. So, club fitting and private lessons are banned at this point in time, as they don't allow any practice ranges or practice areas to be open. That being said, I am available to play golf with customers as they should wish, but it's just the restrictions are very, very tight. But we're hoping that they get loosened up here very shortly. As it seems as though from all the operators I talked to over the weekend and then now that the players really, really did a very, very good job standing up and following the restrictions and making our jobs a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think a lot of people realize what's been going on, and they're trying to be extra cautious for obvious reasons. And even though they're excited to get back out there and play, and now we're coming into some nice weather pretty much everywhere. I know it's still a little bit cool in some spots up north, but it's getting into nicer weather, and they want to get out. And we've all been kind of cooped inside for the most part for the better part of a month and a half, going on to 2 months now. And it's just nice to get outside. So I'm glad to hear that things are moving forward. And obviously, many of the professionals nowadays, including I know you guys, have, even before all this happened, have sort of gravitated to a lot of online stuff as well. So that really helps. And again, obviously there are some even some slowdown in that area, but it's nice that you've been able to communicate with some of your more frequent customers and that through online process analysis and things like that. So at least you're able to keep some of that momentum going. And once we get as I say, once the veil has been lifted, I think that people will be coming in droves, and I know in some places they already are. But glad to hear that you guys are opening up there, and things are starting to move a little bit, as slow as it is. But I'm glad to hear that. All right, we're going to have an interesting discussion tonight, and I actually, when I do these Coaches Corner segments, I try to research a little bit ahead of time to find some things that I think would be interesting. And I came across a blog that was done by, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due. His name is Mark Solomon with Golf Made Simple, and it's a blog that he has. And he did a segment, or a post, if you will, and asking the question, would you rather? So I'm going to pose to each of you a would you rather question. So you're going to have to listen real intently, and I'll try to keep them as brief as possible. And I'd like to one, answer what you feel would be the better option of the two, and maybe explain a little bit why, for our golfers out there, why it would be, particularly for our amateurs, why it would be maybe a better option. So I'm going to give you an example of one. I'm not going to answer on this one, but just to give you. So he uses this one, would you rather hit your pitching wedge from 50 yards away, to an island green surrounded by water that is, and he gives the examples, only 5 yards in depth, so front to back, and 40 yards wide left to right, or to a green that is 40 yards in depth and only 5 yards wide. And obviously in that case, I think most people would rather have the first option, having the green a little bit wider, because they're not going to be, too concerned with direction, and it's much harder, obviously, to control the distance. So I think that would be a pretty straightforward one. So I'm going to go, and Bill, I'm going to start with you if that's okay, and go to a second one. So that's just the gist of the questions. I'll try to explain them, and if you're unsure or didn't pick up on something, I'll be more happy to repeat it. So this one here is the example, would you rather hit your best shot solid, perfect from 155 yards to the flag, watch as your ball flies perfectly straight at your target, a perfectly struck ball along directly at the flag, yet it flies on the green over the green by 5 yards, or hit a half-topped, long drive, ugly-looking shot from 150 yards to the flag that lands 35 yards short of the green, but continues to roll up onto the green and ends up 12 feet from the hole. So it's giving you two scenarios. Would you rather hit a perfect shot that maybe doesn't have the best outcome, or a less than perfect shot but has an optimal outcome? Just explain what you feel would be the best option there of the two scenarios, and why you think for amateurs that might be the best choice.
Well, Ted, to hit on some old cliches, there are no pictures on the scorecard. Number one, which hopefully everybody understands that and can enjoy that thought. And it's a results-based game. We need to hit our target areas, and there is no pretty in golf. Sometimes ugly gets it done when pretty puts it in a hazard or puts it in a place that you can't get up and down from. So I know it sounds very crazy, but as opposed to flushing it, I would rather have a good result, because then I can play on from there if I hit my target area.
Right, and this kind of goes to really a point that I know you're bringing up, and that is, I think a lot of our amateur golfers, and Pete, I'm sure you would agree with this too, are more concerned about how their shot looks more often than not than really what, as Bill just pointed out, is what the end result is. I mean, I'm more excited about the end result, and if it's a less than perfect looking shot, I'm gonna accept that. So I'm going to ask you a similar question and get you to respond. In this particular one, it's really more of not on a specific hole, but a generalization, and it talks about when you hit 14 solid, perfect drives that carry 275 yards down the fairway, drives that your playing partners can't stop talking about how beautiful a shot it is, and as you watch it soar through the air, yet all 14 drives get a terrible bounce that knocks the ball 40 yards to the right into the trees, leaving you in only one position of hitting straight back out to the fairway without advancing the ball a yard closer to the hole, or hitting 14 drives that slice 15 yards and go about 190 yards, but each drive lands in the fairway, leaving you with a 5-iron and a perfect angle to the green. So it's giving you, again, a very similar scenario as to what Bill had, where you're hitting very solid shots, but maybe not having a great outcome. And in this case, you're hitting, not so many great drives, but having a much better result. So maybe just, reaffirm what Bill said and add your own thoughts in here as well.
Well, yeah, I'm going to track right down the road with what Bill was talking about. Golf is all about the results and what you get out of it. So, these drives, if they're going to end up in play and I've got a chance to play from the fairway, that's what I'm going to take. Even though they may not be the same distance, they may not look like they're going to look like. And I like what Bill said before, where no pictures on the scorecards. I've asked people a lot of times, just to what you're talking about, amateurs wanting to have the ball look a certain way. I said, when you're watching the tour on TV on the weekends, do you see the ball fly or do you just see the result? Or they see the result. And I said, that's what we're after here. So let's get the results down first, because in the end we have to score. So I would definitely take the drives that are going to end up, in the fairway where I have a 5-iron I can play from and go from there. And even it's just a story along that line. I got to spend some time with Calvin Pete, who, we all know drove it straighter than just about anybody. And even he said he'd back up 20 yards if he knew everyone would end up in the fairway. And, he wasn't the longest of hitters, but he knew he could play from there. And so there's a lot to be said about the reason why the center of the grass is mowed shorter than the outsides. There's a reason for that. It's easier to play from there, and there's not as much hazards there. So I would definitely take the tee balls ended up in play.
Yeah, and I think it's, there's a lot of lessons sort of within some of these examples that he uses. And what was interesting about it, and I know there's a lot of similar outcomes, but there's a lot more that you can kind of unpack. For instance, this one here, Bill, is really talks about hitting greens in regulation. So you're hitting all the greens in regulation, but you're 3-putting each of them for a bogey is the first option. The other one, would you rather that or miss all 18 greens in regulation, end up hitting one wedge shot and 2 putts to make bogey on the first 17 holes, and then hit one wedge shot and 1 putt to make par on 18. So obviously you're hitting a little bit better on the second, but it really puts it into perspective because, and I'm going to let you answer this, but the way I look at it is on the first example, you're 3-putting each of the holes. So even though you're getting in greens in regulation, it shows a weakness in your game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it goes back to the target. I'm a big believer and follower of Scott Fawcett in Decade Golf. I think, to be quite honest with you, greens in regulation is a nice stat, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Proximity to your target is really what tells the story. Through his compilations and everything, there's times that the ball off the green is actually more scoreable than one that's on the green. And that's something we have to do in our preparation. But I feel that, if I've got a 10-footer uphill from the fringe that's off the green for birdie versus an 8 or 9-footer that's on a 6-degree slope coming down plus, 4 feet of break in it. And again, those are a little extreme, but I think that there's, the greens and regulations sometimes are not always the best stats to tell you really what you're doing. It's more your proximity to your target and where your next shot is scoreable. I always tell players, you want to make your next shot easier than the one you just had. And sometimes, for the, trying to hit it on the green doesn't necessarily always put them in a place that it's going to be easy to make up and in from 2 putts. Sometimes a chip and a putt is an easier play, or a putt from off the green than a putt from on the green.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we often see in a lot of amateur golfers may not understand why this happens, but quite often we'll see in a tournament where instead of the player hitting right directly towards the target, meaning the flag, they might end up hitting over on the left or the right-hand side or even behind the pin, because the way the slope is, it helps feed the ball, because they know that the undulations in the green are going to feed the ball towards the hole. And a lot of times a direct shot coming in at the target is not necessarily the best option because, again, you run into the risk of it being too long and it goes over or put you in an awkward position. Even though it might be a shorter putt, you might now have a downhill putt. So you're exactly right in your analogy. Is there's a lot of thought has to go into this, and I think sometimes, guys, believe it or not, I think a lot of players, if they were faced with some of these same scenarios, the few that I've given already, they might not choose the option that you're choosing, because to them, their way of thinking is, I would rather look good and be hitting it solid and then worry about the score later. And I think sometimes if they would focus on the score and try to score better, which is ultimately what you want to do, then you can kind of work on some of the other things along the way. But, we've seen it time and time again, some great players on tour that are phenomenal ball strikers, but they're not winning tournaments. So, it just goes to show you, it doesn't matter how successful you are hitting the golf ball, if you're not putting it in the hole in the few strokes possible, you're not winning the tournament. So, Pete, this one's for you, and this is a pretty easy one, but I thought it was kind of interesting. It goes right on to what I talked about. Would you rather be known as an excellent ball striker that can't break 90, or be known as an inconsistent ball striker that never scores higher than 89? I think that's a pretty easy one. What do you think?
Well, you're pulling at my heartstrings, because you know how I am about contact, because I'm always wanting to be the one that hits it more solid. But again, you're going after results. I mean, if you're going to be able to not hit it as well on a daily basis, but be able to score, then I'll take the scoring. I mean, that's really what the game's all about. When you end up coming in the clubhouse, they ask you what you shot. They don't ask you to describe it. So you're just looking at a score. So yeah, I think I would definitely go with the scoring on that. With the caveat though, Ted, you know how well I go after ball striking. Mm-hmm. So, but I'll go for the scoring on this one.
Well, and that's that's really the point that I was trying to get at, is I think I would rather be somebody that is scoring well, and then, once I know how to play and how to get it in the hole, then I can worry about, prettying up the swing a little bit if I want to. without changing anything drastic. And I think sometimes, and Bill and Pete, I know you've seen this many, many times with some of your amateurs, is they will spend hours on the driving range trying to perfect that golf swing and try to hit every shot perfectly. But then when you get them out in a playing lesson, they can't put two good shots together and to save their life. So it's really for naught. And I think it's a matter of really helping people to understand that, yeah, you've got to work on the fundamentals and you've got to, work on improving your ball striking along the way. But the ultimate reason you're out there is to shoot a good score. I mean, would you rather be breaking 100 or shooting 100 or breaking, 90, an 80 or, and beyond, depending on your abilities? So I think you have to put things in perspective. Bill, this one here is kind of an interesting one as well. And for the player that playing 18 holes today, so playing around today and another 18 holes tomorrow, and scores 80 today, is obviously going to be very, very happy. But on his round tomorrow, he shoots 100. So obviously he's going to be very frustrated because he shot 20 strokes lower the day before. Or would you rather both rounds shoot 90 both days?
Well,
what are your thoughts on
that's a really good one. That's a really, really good one to ask, because that everybody wants consistency. But to me, consistently bad is not very good either. I'd rather see a player shoot 80 than 100, because we can fix that pretty fast with some strategy things and with some mental work. The problem is if somebody just shoots 90 all the time, they're not really getting excited. So, I mean, to be quite frank with you, I'd almost rather see that with a player find that big move. And people come to us all the time. They say, I just want to be consistent. I said, well, define consistent. Yep. Well, I want to do everything kind of the same all the time. Well, if that's shooting 90, I'd rather you be inconsistent and throw an 80 in there, because the two things that we can do consistently as human beings is think and stand up to the golf ball correctly, and we can figure that out pretty fast.
Yeah, and it raises an interesting, that's a great point. It raises something very interesting, guys, is this, and Bill, you really hit it on the head. It might sound at first glance, or look at first glance, that, shooting 90 both days would be the better choice. But really, I would rather have a player that can shoot 80, and even if he shoots 100 the next day, because it tells me that he or she has the ability to go lower. So it's a matter of, let's examine both rounds. Let's see what you did to shoot that 80 and what did you do to shoot the 100. And you're right, it's an easier fix with a player like that than it is that somebody that's consistently shooting, 89, 90, 91 in that range all the time, because there's not very much improvement. But, somebody that's coming out there can shoot a pretty low number on any given round, and then even if they're not shooting that great, it gives me sort of a benchmark to work with, because I know that they're now capable of getting those lower scores, and it's just a matter of really examining what it is that they're doing to get to that level. So I agree with that. I think that's a better route. I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll move on. Pete, this one's for you. And this is the scenarios in a scramble tournament environment. So the question is, would you rather be the golfer in the group that gets chosen to hit their tee shot last in the group because you're the bomber, once someone else in your group has played safe to the fairway so you can try to bomb the ball as far as you can, or would you rather be the golfer picked to putt last in the group because you're known as the best putter and you could watch everybody else putt so that you can read their putts and have a better idea of what the ball is doing? So you're the bomber. Is that the better option there, hitting it last after everybody hits their tee shot to see what you can do if you can put some extra distance, or if you're a really good putter, isolating that particular area of the game? What are your thoughts there?
Well, that's another good one. I've actually been both, so I'd have to say I'd go with the putting. I'd rather be the one to putt last to get a good look at it, because I would feel much more confident that I can roll them in from that scenario, and instead of the one bombing them out there. So you're still going to have to, in scrambles, inevitably you end up on the greens in regulation anyway. So all the time bombing it off the tee, except for maybe some par fives. It can be a little bit of an advantage, but to me, I'd rather be the one that comes up last with the putter in hand, and I definitely feel much more confident in that way. And I think it just the scenario with that too is I always tell them, usually when I'm playing in these, they want me to putt last, and I always tell them, I said, hopefully I don't have to putt at all today. So would you guys make them so I don't have to? But I still think that would be a better scenario to be in, to have the putter in hand, putting last, after seeing what's going on.
Excuse me. Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think it's nice and it's fun and it can be exciting to be able to grip your driver and launch it a mile out there. But at the end of the day, it goes back to what we've talked about here, and that is really scoring and getting getting in position, getting to your targets. And if you've got a group where you're consistently hitting it in the fairway, even if it's maybe not as far as some of the other groups, but you're in play all the time, that's going to increase your chances. So now it comes down to really a matter of scoring. And if you've got somebody that's a pretty stellar putter in your group, then it gives you an opportunity to, as they point out in the example, to allow the others to sort of pave the way, if you will, and see how the green's going to react. And then your better putter can step up and hopefully capitalize on what he's learned. So I agree with that. It's an interesting thing, and like I said, the reason why I wanted to choose that, I know it seems kind of like a silly comparison in a lot of these questions, but as you both pointed out, there's a lot of golfers out there that really don't think their way around the golf course. They focus on things like some of the things we pointed out here in the questions that are really not going to help them at the end of the day. And that's really what our job is as instructors and coaches, is to be able to help them navigate around the golf course and find their way to scoring better. And I think sometimes your decision making is critical, whether you're a good ball striker or whether you can hit the ball well or not. At the end of the day, if you can't put everything together and score well, it doesn't really mean anything. It might look good, but it doesn't really mean anything, and you're not going to win anything in tournaments or scrambles or what have you. So I think that's important. All right, I want to shift to going back to a little bit of what we talked at the beginning. We've got a situation now where a lot of people have not been able to get out and play, and people are concerned. They haven't been able to practice, and there's been a lot of creativity along the way as well. Some people working at home. Talk about, and I'm going to start, Pete, with you, if you don't mind. Talk about some of the things that the folks can be doing. Golf courses, as you mentioned, are starting to open up, but we're not quite at full force yet. What are some things that people can be doing, both on and off the course, if they're open, that can be helping their game? Considering they haven't been able to do much for maybe the last couple of months. What are some things that they can be doing right now to sort of recharge the 2020 season?
Well, if they haven't been out much at all or been doing anything at home, but first thing I would do is find your little stretching routine before you get started. Make sure you get yourself loosened up and ready to go, that you don't, run into it too quickly because you're anxious to get out there and end up, hurting yourself. So I would definitely, get some stretching routine in. You just take the club, swing a few in the backyard if you can, just to loosen up and, get yourself prepared to go out there. And, some of the things you can do at home, obviously you can putt on the carpet or some on the hardwoods. And, one of the things that's been fun about this lockdown situation is seeing all the videos of all the unique courses people have built in their houses for practicing.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of fun to see those and all the different things they've been able to do. It's quite entertaining. But there are some things you can do at home with, rolling some putts, just getting a feel for what's going on. If you can have a place where you can pitch a few, chip a few, just to get a club in your hand, get used to the feel of what's going on, make a few, practice swings if you don't have the ability to hit any. And then once you get out to the golf course, start yourself off, pretty slow, grab some of the short ones, hit a few of the short shots if you've got the ability to do that, to hit some putts, get used to those short shots because they're going to help you score, and then ease yourself into the long ones. sort of, as I always like to say, warm yourself up to play. Hit some of the shots that you're going to be hitting that you're going to have, so you may as well practice them before you start. So, work on the short game. It's always going to be important. The putting green, obviously we're going to have some social distancing. So, if that's the case, pick an edge and just work on your distance control and just putt it to the fringe. That's a great way to learn speed, and that's going to be one of the biggest things that you're going to need when you play is, how fast are the greens. So get that speed control down before you start. You don't necessarily have to hit to a hole. If you need some confidence that you're going to make something, go 1 foot away and knock it in and go on. But, get the speed down before you start. That's going to be very beneficial for going to play. So, just be conscious of what you're doing. I mean, take it easy at the start. It's been, some people don't start till now anyway, but I know people are itching to get out there. I know my phone's starting to ring because I know we can get outdoors and get it going. So, but I tell them, make sure you get prepared, do some stretching. You've been sitting around and probably not doing much if you haven't been out. So just, loosen up and just be conscious of what you're doing so you don't jump in too fast. But, by all means, get out there and get started.
Yeah, I agree. And Bill, what about you? I mean, for a lot of folks right now that haven't been able to get out, are you going to sort of treat this as a late start to the season and approach it from that way? I know maybe there's been some people that you've been able to work with, whether through an online presence or not, but are you going to sort of treat this as a late winter thaw and say, okay, we're going to start now with some of the folks that are, as Pete just pointed out, that have maybe been hibernating a little bit and maybe haven't had the opportunity for one reason or another? What's going to be your approach moving forward now as things are beginning to open?
It's a really good question. I've gone over that. I've had some Zoom calls the last 4 weeks with a lot of the regulars at Balmoral Woods. And, one of the big things I was talking to them about is doing some walking, because we are going to be walking a little bit more with the single carts. And if they ban the single carts, you're going to be walking. So definitely get that working out a little bit. That goes into the line with some stretching and being in reasonable shape. The biggest key swing-wise that I'd really like to add on to people is really focusing on their balance. Being sure that you're not too far on your toes, not too far on your heels, not leaning too far left, not leaning too far right, but in a good, solid, stable position, because that is going to have a dramatic effect on your tempo and the speed of your swing with your dynamic balance, allowing you to hit more solid shots, as Pete likes to talk about. If our balance is poor, it doesn't matter how good you think your tempo is, it's going to be very, very inconsistent. That's a big thing I see people coming out of the chute having some problems with. And, of course, off course, something that we can do is doing some pitching and chipping in the backyard. Working on high shots, low shots, something as simple as taking your most lofted wedge and hitting a ball about as short as you can, maybe 3 feet. Then take the next one, try to chip it over that. Then take the next one and hit it over that. Then hit the next one, hit 5 balls that way, just to get a little bit of a sense and feel of how the club is moving, interacting with the ball and the turf. And I think you'll see a big improvement. And, going back to the balance, as my old saying is, we can close our eyes. Take some practice swings with your eyes closed, because once you turn off the cameras, you're going to be flying on instruments, and you'll know right where everything is.
Right, exactly. Well said. The question comes to mind as we all, move forward, sort of in the aftermath of what's been going on. And, a lot of folks have had to make changes, not only in their golf game, but even how we approach things. Now, obviously, things will return to a familiar sense, if you will, hopefully over the next few months. But I think there's going to be some changes, long-term changes, as a result of social distancing, because this potentially could happen again. So what I want to ask you both at this point is, what changes have you made or are planning to make in preparation? Have you adjusted? Have you changed your business model, how you're doing things, and how you will do things in the future? Not necessarily in preparation, but just as the result of what's happened. Are there changes that you're looking at or have been making or have already done that will serve you down the road as a result of whatever potential changes, both in the interim and then obviously permanently down the road? There may be some changes on how we do certain things in our everyday life when it comes to, obviously, in this case, golf. So I'm just curious to see if you have implemented some changes already that you will sort of carry on down the road to some level or some degree, and if not, what have you been thinking about that you may approach maybe a little bit differently, knowing what we know now? Pete, you go first, and then Bill.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ted. There's definitely going to be some things that are going to be a little bit different. I use quite a bit of video, so for me, I've got set up to where I'm going to have a monitor that they can use to see, and I'll cast what I'm doing over to it, so that I can keep my distance from them while explaining to them, and they can see. Normally you hold an iPad or something right next to them and talk to them, but you're not going to be able to do that for a while. So I've got a setup to where they can actually see a monitor and look at it, and that'll take care of that situation. I had one just the other day where we were talking, and he has one of the programs that I use, so I was filming and doing some things on it, and then voicing over and shooting it right to him right there while we're standing there, and so he can play it right back. We didn't have the monitor set up at this time, but he could look at it on his and see the playback right away. So those are a couple of things that are going to have to be adjusted a little bit. For me, I do quite a bit of online lessons anyway, so that part didn't have to change as much. But what it did do for me is I was able to set up a home range, back basically in the backyard. So I'm going to be doing a lot of filming out of that. So it worked out quite well. So I think I'm going to utilize that more to be doing more things from there, more stationary, and doing a lot more drills and things from that situation. And plus, I think it gives people, the idea you can do these types of setups at home, and it can really help your practice, even if you're hitting, 14 feet into a net or 12 feet into a net. There's a lot of things you can do and work on and look at. And so those are a few things that, the golf course changes are going to be some too. I mean, you're going to have to be, limited in the spacing. So you're going to have to watch yourself out there, which is fine. And if there's, going to have it to twosomes or singles or whatever you want to do, we'll just adapt with the times and how they go. I don't think the golf course will be terribly different, other than I think it fuels for a lot more playing lessons. I think that's going to be a pretty cool thing to do. But I just think from an overall standpoint, I think we're just going to have to be aware of our surroundings. We're such, as human beings, we're such, in a personal tone of shaking hands and, hey, how you doing? And, some of those things are going to have to, take a back seat. But, I think just for me, those are probably the biggest things that I'll have to do. And I'm sure I'm going to encounter some more as I go along, because, as I said, we just got started going back outdoors to give face-to-face lessons. So I'm sure I'm going to encounter a few more things as we move down the road.
Yeah, and Bill, for you, I'm sure that you mentioned a few things earlier, but I think in a lot of ways it's allowing us as instructors and coaches and that to really become very creative. We're dealing with a younger generation coming up now, which are very more into technology, and they like not only video, but they like to have that social media or social interaction online, if you will, or through some other format. So it really opens the door for a lot of possibilities, some which Pete talked about. So what about you? What are you going to do moving forward? What things are you going to adjust, if anything, as a result of what's going on? And do you feel it's going to add to and give you some other opportunities that maybe you hadn't considered as a result of what's gone on?
Yeah, it certainly is. And fortunately for me, I've never been a touchy-feely coach. So I prided myself in being able to communicate things to people without me having to show them, but without touching them. And I think that's going to be a big hurdle for a lot of coaches. And I can foresee that right away. Myself personally, the playing lesson is something I've been working on putting things together once we get back to foursomes, where I can work with 3 players at one time and give myself a lot more access. I've also, I'm getting reworked, so it's going to have to do through that video lessons through the app, and I use another product called Blast Golf,
Mm-hmm.
which is a sensor that goes on the end of the club, and that is training for 14 clubs, and it is Bluetooth that goes onto the iPad or the iPhone, so I can use it right that moment there, but also with utilizing it with video as well. So there's a lot of technology that I have available that you don't have to be standing right on top of somebody to be able to communicate effectively to them how things, how you could suggest to do things so they're going to get better results.
Yeah, and I think, this is going to open up the door for a lot of instructors to be able to, Pete, as you talked about, not everybody's going to be able to do it quite to the same degree as you do, depending on their circumstances, but it's going to give people the opportunity to be able to work on things even at home without having to get into, obviously eventually driving ranges and that will reopen as people become more confident as policies change. But for right now, it opens up a door to really allow people to work on some of these things that they can work on at home and not have to drive to the golf course, especially with people that have time restraints. They may only have 15, 20 minutes to work on something, and they think, well, it takes me nearly that long just to get to the facility, and I don't have that. Now it suddenly becomes closer to an hour, so they don't have that time. So if they can do some things, if their coach or teaching pro can say, hey, let's do a Zoom chat, or let's do, what other format, and let's give you some things to work on. And if you're able to set up a little workstation, in your backyard, that you can, utilize some of these tips and drills, that when you get out on the golf course, you're going to be a little bit more familiar and not, starting from behind. I think the other thing too, what's really kind of interesting right now is, and as both of you alluded to earlier, we're seeing a lot of innovative things and very interesting videos online with people just doing all kinds of things just because they want to do something to alleviate the boredom. But I think that we have to, as an industry, there's going to be some, I'm sure they're going to be very slow to want to make changes, but they're going to have to if they want to survive. And I think it's a matter of utilizing what's available out there, and as far as technology, and also with some of the new techniques, because, Bill, as you pointed out, you're somebody that's not really a hands-on person or a touchy-feely type person, so you're going to have to be more creative, to be able to work with your students. What is, and Pete, I'm going to come back to you, what is the thing that you're looking forward to most this season besides getting back? What about as far as on the professional level? We have gone without watching really any golf for some time. What are some things that you're looking forward to as far as on the professional level, working with people, and also the tournaments and so forth?
Yeah, it's going to be quite interesting with, the professional side to see how well these guys are going to be prepared. I know I've got several of them that I'm working with that we're, trying to keep them, moving along during this time. And it actually, for a couple of them, has been really good because we've been able to make some significant changes while they're not playing. So that's been a real blessing on that side. But, I think just from being a fan of golf, it's going to be nice to be able to see the pros back out playing again, the different tours out going. It's going to be good for golf to have it back on TV so we can watch it. But I think what I'm looking forward to more than anything else that you were just talking about is in this time is, the challenge of being more creative and figuring out better ways and different ways to get results, to get things done with the students, to get better pictures of what you're trying to do. So I think that's going to be fun to be able to, go out and where you would normally be able to do something that you can't do now. How am I going to get this point across, even better than I used to before? under the circumstances. So I think that's going to be a pretty cool challenge, and I'm looking forward to. And it was funny because I was even thinking that the other day, the first time I was out, I'm standing there, I'm thinking, okay, how am I gonna get this across? So I'm already being challenged to try to figure out a different way to get this point across to the student. And I think it's I haven't been a real, as Bill said, hands-on type myself either, but I just think it's going to be a great way to really, really challenge all of us to become better at what we do, more efficient in what we do. And I think the students are going to be the beneficiaries because they're going to be able to catch on, I think, more clearly, because I think we're going to get better at what we're doing. So I think overall for the game, it's going to be great. But I'm really looking forward to the tour players getting back out there and playing. I just think having them out there playing and the abilities to watch it and hear what's going on, I think is just a great service for the game, and I'm really looking forward to having it back out.
Yeah, I'm sure many of them are just itching to get back out. Excuse me. Bill, something that I don't know whether a lot of people in the golf industry have really thought about, but one thing coming out of this pandemic that I thought I was thinking about the other day, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Families have been forced to sort of hunker down together, over these last, couple of months. We've all, for the most part, been pretty much forced to be into a lock-in situation. And because, we're not able or have not been able to get out and do a lot of things independently, it's given people, I think, a greater chance to spend more quality time together. People, reflect and take a sort of an easier approach because we're limited on what we can do. And I know last week on the panel, one of the guys mentioned that they're getting a lot of people because their courses have been open. They've been getting a lot of people, families particularly, parents bringing their kids just because, they've got nothing to do and they're looking. Golf was one of the few refuges, if you will, of availability compared to other things. And I'm wondering if this is an opportunity to really target families for golf and saying, hey, you know what, we've got to take things slow, but this is an opportunity for your family to do something together as a group. And even though, yes, we've got to monitor distancing and things like that. What do you think about that? I mean, we've all been trying to do that, but because people have been kind of put in a box, if you will, it's given them more bonding time, if you will, as families, which we haven't really done, unfortunately, for a long time because everybody's busy doing their own things. But now we've been forced to do, something different. Do you see that as an opportunity for the industry to say we need to focus on things that can help people to continue that relationship a little bit better and now bring it into golf?
Talking with a lot of the folks I know all around the country, and having experienced this in South Florida before they shut us down, and even going up into Central Florida, we're seeing a lot of people who had played very little starting to play a lot again. My pet peeve, the lapsed player, the person that used to play 4 times a month now plays 4 times a year. That is an opportunity that we have available right here, right now, in front of us for that lapsed player. Families, I think we're doing, there's a lot of clubs like mine that do a fantastic job with promoting family activity, and that's only going to grow from this once the it's allowed to happen a little bit more. But I say that I think we're going to start to see a lot more people who haven't played much. They had some spare time on their hands or some forced time, and there was one thing that they do. It was even some places you couldn't fish, but you could golf. So, I think, I think, depending on where you're at, this is a wonderful opportunity to get that lapsed player and get that, like I said, that person that used to play 3 to 4 times a month and now play 4 times a year if they're lucky. If we can get them to double their output, I mean, think about all the lapsed players and the underserved players out there. If we can get them to double their rounds. If they played 8 rounds last year, let's get them to play 16 this year. What a biblical impact that will have on the industry.
Yep.
I mean, it will be absolutely crazy.
Well, and yeah, that's an excellent point, and I couldn't agree more. What was interesting about the comments that he made last week on the show was that there were a lot of people that were coming out to that facility that had never picked up a golf club before. So it was introducing, and although it was being forced in the sense that, obviously they were limited in what they could do. So, golf for them, fortunate for us, but maybe in their thought was the only option available. But it introduced a sport and a game to people that had never picked up a club before. So I think this is a real opportunity for the industry to be even more welcoming and more inviting to those that not only have never played before, but Bill, as you pointed out, people that maybe haven't played that much or are not playing that much for whatever reason, they're going to be looking for things to do. So yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for clubs and for organizations and for teaching professionals to reach out to some of their members and some of their fellow students that maybe haven't been out for a while and say, hey, you know what, this is an opportunity maybe to rekindle that fire that you had out in the golf game, and if we need to work on a few things to help that come to fruition, then that's a great opportunity as a teaching professional to be able to capitalize on that. And I think you're exactly right. I think this would be a pristine opportunity for the industry to do just something like that, and I think you're going to see it happen. Hopefully, we'll get that going. But first and foremost, we need to lift the veil and get everybody out there and playing and get some back to some sort of a normalcy. But it's certainly been an eye-opener, I think. What about just sort of some final thoughts on the season? Again, Pete, we haven't been able to watch any tournament golf. Do you think, this is just a basic question, obviously nothing too in-depth, do you think it's going to be hard for people to get back into it, knowing that part of the season is going to be gone?
I don't think so. I think they're willing to their favorite players play again, and so regardless of what the schedule is, I think they'll put enough, events out there. Having the Masters in November, I mean, what a great deal that's going to be. I'm looking forward to that.
Right.
And then you only have a few more months, and then we have it again. So I think that's going to be a really cool thing to experience. Where they've placed the tournaments, and I think they've done a good job of that. But I don't think so. There'll probably be a few that may not, because they haven't been able to watch so far. But I think because of what's been going on, I think they're anxious to watch it. I know I am, and anxious to get some of those the players that I coach out there and see how they do. But I think it's going to be really good. And I think to your point, to what you were just talking about, if they're smart and they can get some advertising going on, they should be talking about the same points you were just talking about. We do have a huge advantage to be able to get more people out there. So if they can, the PGA of themselves can think about that and some of the type of advertising they do, they can really do a great service to the game by getting the word out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And obviously, Bill, as Pete just pointed out, the Masters is now going to be in November. And, the schedule has obviously been adjusted. There's been some, major tournaments. The Open's not going to be played this year. Obviously some other earlier events. Do you think it's going to be difficult for some of the players? They came out of the gate. I mean, I interviewed the first winner on the Symetra Tour this season, and then the very next week, of course, they went into a sort of a shutdown, if you will. Do you think it's going to be difficult for the players having such a long period off and sort of interfering with their season, that it's going to be a little difficult for them to pick up their momentum, or are they just going to treat it as starting a brand new season from this point on?
That's a great question. I think certain players will just keep going, moving on, because they've been disciplined enough to work on their bodies and physical, work on their mental routines, and keep themselves extremely sharp, ready to go. Those that have had ability to play have been playing money games with their friends and their cohorts. I think it's an easy excuse for a lot of people, though, to say, well, I had momentum and lost it and everything. And, anybody that I've known that's a champion would never say, hey, I had a lot of momentum, things stopped. It was a rain delay. How many players come out of a rain delay? We looked at this as a prolonged rain delay.
Right.
Play great, and then they hit darkness and come out the next morning and birdie the next, or somebody else comes out and double bogeys both of them. I think it just goes to the person and it's individual how they're going to handle this situation. Some will be woe is me, and others will see it as half full, and it's just a time to rejuvenate. And in the way that the season has become protracted as it is, where it's a continual 365-day tour season, basically, with Christmas week off, I really have a feeling that some people, they take their break now, and then they just pile it up on the end. So I don't, it's going to be on an individual basis. I really have to say that, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I definitely will tell you that some players will handle it better than others.
Sure. Well, this goes to really, sort of the ultimate test, of course, management, but on a bigger scale. You're right. There's going to be some players that handle themselves very, very well. They're going to come out that, like you said, they've been keeping themselves in shape, that have been, doing whatever they can to practice wherever they can to keep their game sharp. And obviously they, haven't been able to get out there perhaps in some cases and actually hit shots. I think most of them have probably positioned themselves in an area that they could do something. But it's going to be a test. It's going to be interesting to see, because they were all fired up and ready to go on all of the tours. And then suddenly, there was an abrupt halt and, some cancellations midstream. I mean, the Players was one. I mean, that was, kind of an odd situation in its own. So it's going to be interesting to see how the players handle it. It's going to see who really has the mental capacity, if you will, and the fortitude to be able to, just say, okay, I'm going to treat this as though the season's starting right now. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. I'm warmed up. And let's get out there and make some things happen. And I think there's going to be some others that are saying, well, we're in June, July now, and or August, depending on what happens. And mentally, in their mind, part of the season's gone, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I'm going to be excited when it comes back either way, and I'm looking forward to everybody getting back out there and playing some golf and enjoying this great game. Well, that's it, guys. Believe it or not, that was our hour together, and I'm going to give you an opportunity both to just let the folks know if they want to reach out. The best way to do it. Pete, you go first, then Bill.
Again, thanks, Ted, for having me on. Bill, it's always great to be with you. They can reach me at planesimplegolf.com. It's PLANE for the plane. All my contact information's out there. So, if you're interested, just reach out to me, and then let's get a conversation started and talk about your golf game. So that's it.
Perfect. Very well. Thank you. And Bill, what about yourself?
Simplest way to get me is my website, BillAbramsGolf.com. Pretty simple. All the contact information there, email from phone to everything. And I have my app available now from Swing U. It's just Bill Abrams Golf Solutions Academy. You can download that, and then you can message me. I will get you the code to get into it.
Perfect. Well, congratulations on the launch of that, and I hope that a lot of folks will take advantage of it and download that. Guys, continue to stay safe and good luck this season. I know it's going to be a little bit of a slower start than what we normally would be used to, but I know that it sounds like you guys have been well prepared and are continuing to prepare and make adjustments along the way. And it's going to be a learning curve for everybody, I think, but I think everybody's been handling it pretty well. So much continued success, guys, throughout the season, and I will see you next time on Coach's Corner. Thanks for doing it, guys.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks for having us, Ted. Really appreciate it. Take care, Pete.
Thanks. You too, Bill.
All right, that was Bill Abrams and Pete Buchanan on the Coach's Corner panel. A little bit lighter discussion tonight. We talked a little bit about the current situation, and we talked about some would-you-rathers, if you will, which was kind of an interesting thing. And again, I want to give credit where credit is due, and that was Mark Solomon, Golf Made Simple. It was an interesting blog that I came across with, and he had some very interesting takes on a couple of different scenarios and what would you rather do, and the guys just sort of firmed it up a little bit and as to how they would handle a situation and why it was beneficial one way as opposed to the other. All right. Glad to have my special guest on tonight. He's not only been a featured guest many times, but he has also been a member of the Coaches Corner panel over the years as well. I'm talking about, of course, Tim Kremer. He is the president and founder of Peak Performance Mind Coaching, LLC. He's also a visionary peak performance mind coach with locations in Palm City, Florida, and Cincinnati, Ohio. And he offers a program utilizing innovative and pioneering mind coaching techniques. Please welcome my very special guest, Tim Kremer. Tim, good evening and welcome.
Ted, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. It's as I was just talking to the guys, I'm sure you heard the last few minutes of it. It's been kind of an interesting juncture along the way these last couple of months for many people, yourself included. And I think before we get into tonight's discussion, I'll maybe give you an opportunity to just talk about some of the things that you've been doing and how you've adjusted to what's been going on, with your business. I know you have obviously a strong online presence, but you also work, in close concert with a lot of your students and so forth. But what's been going on the last couple of months? How have you adapted to this crisis with respect to peak performance?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Great to hear. I did catch the tail end of what the guys were talking about. Loved what they had to say, and I pretty much agree. And yeah, what I'm finding is that it's very interesting, of course, in the situation that shut down the tours and everything like that. But what I'm finding, even with my students, is I would dare say that those with a great attitude before everything shut down have remained a great attitude, and everybody that was kind of pessimistic or whatever about their games before the whole thing shut down were the ones that were making it a problem. So it just kind of confirms what I've always said, is that kind of how you're wired is how you're going to see it anyway. So obviously, those are the things we work on and the techniques we work on. So it really has not been that much of a challenge for me as a mind coach. Basically what I do anyway, once I get to work with a player in person, kind of see their game and their swings and their habits and their body language and things like that, then most of our conversations are done remotely or on the phone anyway. So for me, it has not been that challenging. The one thing I would say that has been, I think, a benefit to a lot of them is, and maybe you've seen this too, that a lot of them who were working on a particular move in their swing, really gave them time to do it in a non-competitive situation. A lot of times they're out there week to week and they want to make a change, but they don't really have time to do it. Or if they do it, they're kind of afraid or reluctant to put it into competition. So in a way, it's been kind of, again, the optimistic ones are using this as a time to really improve on something in their games. And I think that that will yield some great benefits once things kick in again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been interesting that the guys were talking about a little early on in the segment that, they've really noticed some very interesting things that people have done. They've, built themselves their own little in-house, if you will, practice facility. I mean, everything from, some pretty ingenious, putting apparatus and whatnot. And they've actually, what was really kind of fresh. I mean, some obviously take it to a little extreme, but what was interesting with some of them, Tim, is that they were very creative in the sense that they made little games out of their putting. And so, and this is something that we haven't seen for a long time with a lot of our golfers, is because, again, they have limited time to get out on the golf course to practice is a big issue. But, and everyday, job commitments and things like that prevents them from really honing in on areas that really need. So this is even not just with the players, but even with the professionals. I've talked to some of my fellow professionals, and they've even had to ratchet back some of the things that they've done and to make adjustments that they normally have not had the opportunity to do because they're just so gosh darn busy. So this has really allowed them an opportunity to reflect and refocus their efforts, and I think it's going to pay off in the long run. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting ready to launch a new website and new apps and things like that, and a new membership program, and that I'm very excited about, and it's really given me the time to do that. And the other thing that I would say is that the private students that I have who are not professionals, but I work with quite a few better low handicap amateurs, whatever, and while they're at home and everything like that, they're having more time than ever to just grab a putter in their house or a wedge in their backyard and work a little on their games during the day because they're not having to be at the office. And so, again, what I'm finding is, and we talk so much in this game about attitude anyway, that those with great attitude have found very creative, fun ways of coming up with new games. One of my guys was put the circle out in the backyard. He'd never had it before, the net out in the backyard, and seeing how many in a row he could do, pitch into it. Well, finally had the time to do that. Now he's been telling himself I'd like to do that for years, but now has the time. So I think this whole thing is really changing the way that we are going to start maybe doing business, even in golf, and certainly communicating with each other. And that we'll take advantage of that moving forward and get ready to do some wonderful things. And hopefully this thing will blow through quite quickly. It looks like maybe we're getting toward the point where things are going to start easing up a little bit. Let's hope so. And we can get back out on the courses and things like that and have some fun.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey, and I've interestingly enough, I think I've had more Zoom chats and online meetings and whatnot in the last several weeks than I think I have in my entire life. So it's been it's been kind of interesting, and so from a technological standpoint, I've had to brush up and hone up my skills to make sure I was doing everything correctly. So there's been a benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And not cutting somebody off midstream.
Exactly.
All right, so I mean, and like I said, there's going to be a lot of synergies that come out of what we're doing right now. I mean, a lot of people have obviously gravitated, as you have, to a variety of different online platforms for teaching and coaching and so forth, have already been doing that. But I think it's allowed them to even take it a step further in some cases, and working with students at home now, as opposed to and as the example I gave earlier with one of the guys, was one of the big problems a lot of people have is they might only have 15-20 minutes to do certain things on their game, and it might be that much or more just to get to the facility that's close by. So now they're now it's an hour. And for that reason alone, many of them are just, heck with it, I can't do that. Where, you can schedule a Zoom call, or you can schedule, there's obviously a lot of different platforms out there where the coach can say to them, hey, okay, let's work on some of these things. You can't get to the range, you can't get to the course, but we can still work on some of these things at home. Get out in your backyard, let's, set up the iPhone or what have you, or the iPad, and we, you know what I'm saying, and interact.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the other thing that I find, and you tell me, but
that's the thing, so.
Sorry to interrupt. The other thing that I see is that we can they do have these little chunks of time, and say, for example, we're maybe this is a very simplistic example, but we're maybe working on a grip change or something like that. Well, this is something they can do, the grip change, and for 15 minutes can just move with the club and feel their bodies, and I think there's a big advantage sometimes to not being able to hit balls and sense your body moving, and bring that as a practice. The other thing that I've experienced as a mind coach, again, is it's a big part of what we do, is we combine the mind coaching with the swing itself and with ball striking, and there's a great opportunity there to when you're not reacting to ball flight, it's a perfect opportunity to learn if you want to make it that. And so again, I'm finding a lot of really excited students that, of course, they can't wait to get out again, but I feel like they've developed a new set of skills that is very exciting to them, and they're ready to go try them out, but at least they've learned it in a way where they've developed some skills, and for when they begin to get out here in a few weeks, hopefully a month or whatever.
Well, there is an area that you don't have to be outdoors, and you don't have to necessarily be on the golf course, but through some very specific training and coaching can help them for when they do get out there. And we're talking about your profession. And I know that you have, from a mind game coaching perspective, that you have a number of qualities that you think really sort of rule supreme, as you put it, in different areas. And I would like you to sort of touch on each of these and maybe explain a little bit more. And I'm talking about, desire, expectation, belief, and acceptance. These are 4 areas that obviously fall into your category. And these are things, again, they don't have to be on the golf course, but these are things that you can be working with them. So let's hit the first one first, desire. Why is desire important?
Desire, I just think that desire is one of those qualities that we want it pretty badly in many cases, and again, with more top athletes, they want it. The question that comes up a lot for me as a coach is that, can I want it too much? Can I desire it too much? And my answer is always, you can't want it too much. Strong desire is not the problem. What the problem is a lack of belief and the frustration that comes in when you're not getting what you desire. So a lot of times what I hear is players who are afraid to want it, but really what that is they're more tapped into the energy of feeling afraid that they can't get it. So the skill that we work on in the mind coaching is really getting them to hold on to that feeling of desire that, I really want this. And that desire feels awesome. And if they were to just stay tapped into the positive feeling of desire, there's never a problem. It's when they start to doubt it and they start to get frustrated. That's the problem. It's not the desire that's the problem. So we try to keep desire at a very optimal level of them standing in before a shot. Now, these are qualities we work on in both the pre and the post-shot routines with some very specific skills. But I'd love to see athletes that have high desire, and they are not afraid to step into a shot feeling like, they really want something great to happen.
And, you're right. I think that it goes back to what you said earlier. It really goes back to their attitude coming into it. And if they have a positive attitude about things, even if they're not playing at their best, even if they're not able to utilize or execute some of the things that as a coach, as a teaching professional, the fact, as long as there's a desire and a thirst for knowledge and wanting to learn is there, they can be very teachable. I mean, I believe anybody can be teachable, but you have to be open-minded and you have to have a certain desire to want to learn. And and want to be, and you have to be receptive to that teaching as well, which some people are not. They close off, and if they're not seeing results the first time around, right away the walls come up. You know what I'm talking about, and that sort of leads us into expectation. Right, exactly. You get a lot of people that they just expect things, from a standpoint, everything's got to happen now, and I can't wait until tomorrow. And that, leads right into expectation. So go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no. I was just going to say, though, a little bit on desire is that they're afraid to want it because it hurts too much to want it. Right. It's like, I'm afraid to get really excited about this. I'm afraid to really want it because, in a way, if I don't get it, then I'm really going to be hurt. And I see this with a lot of mini tour players. They've been out there a long time. They have invested their lives into it at that point. And they get to the point of where they're almost afraid to want it anymore because it has been so painful not getting what they want. What they don't realize is that they're giving more attention to what they don't want than to the feeling of desire and how wonderful it feels to really, really get, it's almost like when they first decided to go down the road of golf, and it may have been as a junior or in college or whatever, that there was just a fun, strong desire, that, just the hopefulness that came with that desire. Well, they kind of lose that. And what happens over time, over the years or whatever, is they start using the proof to chip away at their feeling of desire. And so now the disappointment really kind of sabotages that feeling of desire. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And, I think for a lot of people, they put undue pressure on themselves. And you're exactly right. Even what people don't realize, even touring professionals, fall into that trap where, they've been playing really well, but they're just not seeing the result that they anticipated.
Right.
And this comes into, your next topic, and that was expectation. Their expectations sometimes are so high, and they put so much undue pressure on themselves. And because they're not able to execute it, then that strips away the first one, the desire, but then it puts them in a situation where they're not realizing the goals or the desired level that they had. So talk about expectation. Why is that important? And when you're working with your students, why is that an area that you focus on too?
Yeah, expectation is a lot like desire in that what we really work on is we work on a very high degree of expectation, almost like a no-nonsense type approach to, I just expect to hit a good shot. And it's kind of like desire in that if we're not using results to chip away at the expectation, and we just stay in that place of I expect something great to happen, and if it does, that's great. And if it doesn't, you know what? The next shot I expect to do it well again. And so we're using the mind in a way, and effective mind game coaching is really when we do use the mind to get the emotions out in front of results and performance. So the thing is you could expect something great to happen with the shot that you're about to hit. And if you could teach yourself to do it through mind training, to stand up there and expect something great every time you hit a shot, there's never a problem. The problem is when you start letting the results affect you emotionally, which is a very normal thing to have happen. I mean, that's obviously what we work on, what I work on with students, right? But to teach them to be able to believe in themselves and expect something great to happen with every shot. Now, whether it does or not is not the point. The point is that we can train the mind to feel that way regardless of the results. And when we can get into that mind space, the bottom line is golf is a crazy game, as you know. We've been at this a long time.
Right.
You're never going to be able to control results, but you can control the way that you feel before, during, and after a shot. So that's really the work as a mind coach, what we're after. So expectation is a lot like desire. It's probably a little bit a strong desire to hit a good shot is, certainly we want the strong desire, but I also love to see expectation that, I just flat out expect to hit a good shot here. And that's a no-nonsense approach. I just expect it. And if we're not taking score of the shot, it's a great mind state to have them in. And here's the other thing, the funny thing, Ted, is that athletes love to feel this. It's not like we're asking them to, geez, I got to feel expectation here. This is just, I'd sooner just think that I'm awful. No, they love to feel it. They just haven't been trained how.
What's interesting about that is, when I look at many of our club golfers that have, aged a little bit over the years and they're not hitting it as far, they have an unrealistic expectation. They don't realize that they're not going to hit it 300 yards anymore, or even 250. In my day was the number. Now it's 300, but 250 was the benchmark at when I was growing up. And what happens is they get out there on the golf course. They have a very high, which it's good. You have to push yourself and you have to feel, be in that mindset. But you also have to be realistic that there are going to be things that are going to have to be adjusted and changed along the way. And if you don't hit some of those milestones that you once did, it's not the end of the world. And I think what it does for a lot of people, and I think this is why you get so many of our more senior or more seasoned players dropping out, is because their expectations are, they think, well, I should be able to still hit it. I can hit a pretty good ball. Why am I not hitting it? And number one thing they're looking for is more distance. And when they can't achieve that expectation, suddenly their desire goes away. And that's why you get people that used to play every week now might only play a few times a week because they don't have the desire anymore.
Fair aging warriors. Oh, absolutely fair assessment. I call them the aging warriors, and it's like they've I see it a lot here in Florida because I'm familiar with a lot of the pros who were in their day, really, even as club pros, very, very, very successful, played at a high level, and man, all of a sudden now it's like, bodies start falling apart a little bit, and games start falling apart, and expectations, but see, that's the funny thing is that, and what I did try to share with them is that you can still, and here's the deal, is that you can still expect to hit a great shot, but don't take score of it. And that's the hard part, isn't it? Which, of course, is the fourth area we're going to get into tonight, which is acceptance. But, golf, too, as you know, it's really one of the other things we work on is that golf is really a game of learning to make adjustments, not repetition. And I don't think we do a good job as coaches these days. I think we really, with video technology and all the wonderful tools. And by the way, I love the tools. So I'm not. This is not an assault on that. But it really is a game of adjustment rather than repetition. Well, we've been suckered into believing that we're just going to get you to groove a move that's going to give you consistent results for, forever. And what we've developed are a lot of players who can't adjust when things start going bad. So there's a physical component to that, of course, but there's also really an emotional and a mental component to that too, in that it's a game of change, and we don't look at it that way. We've really got golfers believing that, that it's something that should happen the same way every time. And again, as you kind of alluded to, the seasoned golfers. When that stops happening can be a major disappointment to them. A lot of them do start to drop out of the game. I just don't want to play anymore. I'm not having fun anymore, and it's unfortunate.
Well, unfortunately, I think more so for the guys because there's ego involved. I think we're naturally, born with a supercharged ego, and when things aren't going the way we want, we tend to get in a corner, sulk and pout and stomp our feet.
Right.
And, we've done that as little boys, and we do that as grown adults. And I think, what's true.
Well
listen, but what I often see as well is, and it goes to what you just touched on, is about evolving. One of the problems that I think a lot of our everyday golfers have is, they expect that they're still going to play the same way. Their body is still going to function. They know they're older. They know that, they've got some aches and pains.
Sure.
But they think in their mind that they should be able to hit like a 20-year-old. And what they don't realize is as your joints and your hips and things like that and your shoulders and whatnot, as we age, they change. And that swing that you were going to your point with instructors, we have to be mindful of that, is because if we're teaching them one way to play this game, and then 20 years down the road, we're expecting them to repeat what we've taught them, even though there's been physical changes, then we're actually doing them a disservice, because that's not correct. Because the body changes. It's the same thing as we've got people who, many of our wounded warriors that are injured now, they might once have played a very good game, but now they have to make adjustments. They can't be expected to go out there and play the same way they did, before they lost a limb or before they were, injured. So again, it's a game of constant adjustments. Even the tour players, they all have to adjust as they go along. And it's a matter of, again, coming into the next topic is belief. Is you have to believe in yourself that even though there might be changes, you have to have the confidence and the belief that you can still go out there and play a good game. It may not be the same game, but you can go out there and play. Let's talk about belief.
Excuse me. Absolutely.
Sure.
It's funny as we mention belief, because I believe that belief is the one intangible, maybe all the emotional qualities, desire, expectation, belief, we're never going to be able to measure. And it's funny, in the golf swing, we want to measure everything that we see with the swing, and I get that, and I like that, but it's the one thing that I think that probably as a mind coach that I probably chuckle at the most is when the broadcasters and whatever are trying to tell us what is going through somebody's mind. That's the one intangible we will never, ever, ever know, is what qualities like desire and expectation and belief are going through a player's mind. Everybody's wired differently. Everybody's different from week to week. I mean, we have lives. We have things that we bring with us to the tournament. There's some weeks where we're just sharper mentally and emotionally, which of course I would say translate into the physical. But I do believe that belief is the most important quality that there is within the mind game. That if you can't believe in yourself, but here's the big catch with the quality of belief, is that most people believe that they use the proof of what they see, their practice and how the ball flies and how their bodies move and the shots that they make. They use that to establish their belief, which on the one hand I get, but that's not the kind of belief we're talking about. We're talking about the kind of belief where you walk onto the course believing, again, that something really great could happen today. It's not one of my favorite stories. It happens all the time. You walk onto the putting green of a tournament in the morning, and it's like, hey, Mike, how you doing today? And the first thing Mike says is, well, you know what, I don't know yet. Got to wait and see. Almost like I've got to wait and see how I'm playing before I can tell you if I'm doing well or not. And that is totally the mindset we have to get away from. You again, any of us could feel a strong sense of belief that something good or fun or whatever is going to happen today, and stick with that mindset. And to me, that is the mindset of a champion, that you can sustain the belief in spite of the shots that are kind of you're throwing out there. It's where we get the mind out in front of the proof, and it's Ted. It's the hardest thing in the mind coaching that we do. Obviously, most people want to see the proof before they can believe.
Yeah, and I think we do that in everything in our lives. I think it's if I see that there's little green men and a flying saucer hovering over, then I'll believe that there's aliens. It's like, and I know that's kind of an off-the-beat topic, but it's the same thing. We want to see before we believe.
Well, it is the same thing.
I want to go back.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I want to go back really quickly just to add to a point, something you said a few moments ago, and that was about, a lot of the broadcasters and that, a lot of the times, again, they believe that they're inside the person's mind, and they're basing it on the outcome of a shot or the outcome of a tournament. And really, they don't know what's going on in that player's mind. They don't know at that particular moment when that, tour pro is in the bunker and hits it thin and it goes over into the water on the other side of the green. They don't know what's going through. I mean, these guys are playing at the highest level. It could be anything that could have set them off. And I know that they're just, I know that they're just trying to, to add some banter to it. But a lot of times it also does a little bit of injustice, because what it does is, to the people that are watching these tournaments, it then allows them to start creeping in doubt and when they get over those types of shots, thinking, okay, gosh, I'm thinking, they overanalyze it a lot of times with these players. And I think a lot of times it's just to fill the time in. But, you're right. You can't get into a player's head and really know for sure. We have to guess, and obviously based on their feedback is how we make the assessment.
I know.
But yeah, belief is it. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say, I would dare say that 90% of the juniors that I coach, and I've coached a lot of juniors over the years, but to listen to them talk, they sound just like the announcers. And the unfortunate thing with that is that this is how their belief systems get formed. so that nothing's ever good enough. He shouldn't be making that mistake, this and that. And most of it is not positive banter. It's establishing negative beliefs. And then the kids grow a little older, and they've got a belief system now that's in place that is borderline very negative because of the things that they've heard growing up. Ted, you know this too. I can promise you nobody is out there trying to hit bad shots. They're all trying to play to the best of their abilities. And we don't hear enough of that, in my opinion, because that wouldn't be very controversial, and it certainly wouldn't be the kind of stuff that people want to hear. But in fact, it'd probably be like listening to golf 30 or 40 years ago, where it's just like where the announcers actually said very little, and we just watched more of what went on, and now we're trying to get into their heads and whatever and figure it out. But I think you're absolutely correct. We never ever know what is going through a player's mind, and to second guess. I get asked this all the time as a mind coach. What do you think he was thinking there? And my answer is always the same. I have no idea. But if you were to ask that to most people, they're sitting there saying, well, I think he was thinking this, or when we asked him, he said this.
Sure.
I'm here to tell you, too, that half of them don't even really have a deep level of awareness to the level of maybe fear or apprehension that was going through their brains or their bodies at the time that something unwanted happened. And there's one more variable here is that what's really important to understand is we can have a great mind game and still hit bad shots from time to time, and we can have a lousy mind game and hit incredible golf shots. So the two don't line up in the same moment in time, and over time I truthfully believe that they do, that there has to be a strong sense of belief, but it doesn't mean you're going to sustain this high level of emotion for every shot. We're humans, and we don't do that, but to think that we can ever figure out what somebody else is thinking or how it translates into their movement or their shot selections or their missed shots, or there's a bajillion different variables with every golf shot. Is there not?
Yeah. Oh, at least. And what's interesting is I think for a lot of players, what I often do when I get, when I've worked with different students and, they'll say to me, I wonder, the same scenario, I'm wondering what so-and-so was thinking about. And I throw it back on them and I say, well, if you were in that position, if you were in the bunker or if you were, in the rough or whatever the scenario was, or you're even in the middle of the fairway and you've got this approach shot, what would you be thinking? And I throw it back on them because, not forgetting the tournament that's going on, just in that situation, what would you be thinking about? And it's interesting because if you ask a tour player the same question, what are you thinking right now? You're getting ready to hit this shot. What are you thinking? There's really one thing that the tour player is looking at, and they're looking at where their next target is. Whether it's approaching the green or whether it's a layup or whatever the situation is, or whether it's, positioning it in the fairway. They're not thinking about all the variables. They're certainly conscious of wind conditions. They're conscious of trouble that could be around, but they're not focusing on that. But if you ask most amateurs, given any shot, what they're thinking about, more often than not, they'll come out and say, well, there's water on the left, there's, penalty bunker over here, and there's this, that. They're always looking at it from a negative perspective. And what that does, as you know, is it brings in doubt, and it resurfaces the negative aspects of their abilities. So then their confidence goes away, their expectations go away. I know I can't get it over that ravine, so I'm going to have to do this instead. I know I can't avoid those bunkers on the left, so I'm going to have to lay up over here. So what happens is a lot of times their choices, because they don't believe in themselves, their expectations, and can work the opposite. Sometimes people have unrealistic expectations. They go for it when really they shouldn't. So it skews their level and ability to make sound judgment. And that's the difference really between the tour pros and the rest of us, is the fact that they don't focus on the trouble. They don't focus on the negative aspects. They just have a specific goal, a target in mind, and that's what their goal is, to get it to that target, whatever it might be. And that's simply their goal. Everything else is just irrelevant.
And I love that, and I agree with that. Their minds are more focused on what they want to do than what they don't want to do. And
right.
I think that's a very important distinction. Yeah, the players that I work with, I may simplify this a little bit more than most, but even some of my better players is that there's three things I think for every shot. Is that where do you want to hit it? Where's the best place you want to hit it? And approach shots a lot of times middle of the green, whatever. But then number two is, well, if I don't hit it there, where do I want to be? So that
right.
We're also taking into account the miss. And then number three is, where can I not hit it? I think that they have to be aware of that. But now a better player is going to be aware of it, but they're not going to be scared of it. Whereas I think you hit it right on the head, that you take a not so good player, and it's number three, where can I not hit it, that is receiving most of their focus and intention from inside the mind and the brain. And that's exactly what happens. The story that I share a lot, excuse me, in the clinics that I do, and I think it's a great one. Well, we know now that, if you think about hitting it in the water, you're probably going to hit it in the water. So we've been hearing that one for years. Whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're giving your attention to, is where you're going to hit it. Well, by the way the brain works, that is very true. The brain does not know the difference between what it imagines and what it sees. And so if we are thinking the water, we're upping the chances we're going to hit in the water. So most players are going to say, oh, well, no, I shouldn't be thinking about the water because if I do that, I could certainly go in it. So what am I going to think about? And say, I'm going to think about the middle of the fairway. All right, that's where I want to hit the ball. So they step up to the tee, and sure enough, they hit it right in the middle of the water. and you'll ask them, well, where was your focus? Was it on the middle of the fairway, or was it still in the water? And the answer invariably is, I was still afraid. Now, I tried convincing myself I was focused on the middle of the fairway, but my mind was not in that space. My mind was still in the place of don't make a mistake and hit it into the water. So that the fear, well, actually, one of these qualities we're talking about tonight, there was a lack of belief that they could truly hit it in the middle, in the middle of the fairway. The belief was still that, something bad could happen here, and generally it does.
Well said. Something else, too, that I just want to point out, when you're dealing with the professionals, another way that they look at it is, once they've got their defined target, they also factor in what they consider an acceptable miss. They know where their shots are going to miss.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, if they know they've got a bunker to carry to get onto the green, they know that in order to execute that shot, getting into that bunker, if the shot's not pulled off, is acceptable.
Correct.
On the other hand, if there's water that's there and they're not 100% sure that they can execute that shot, then that shot's no longer an acceptable miss if they get into the water, because now there's penalties involved. Where the bunker, they know they can get out of.
Correct.
So that's part of the assessment that a professional is going to look at differently than what an amateur is going to do. Is most professionals that have been playing for any length of time, for more, and obviously there's exceptions where a shot may go off a little bit differently, but for the most part, they know that if their shot is not pulled off, they know that the outcome more often than not is an acceptable outcome. So they play a percentage. They say, again, giving examples I just used, they know that bunker is a higher percentage than if there was a pond surrounding that green. So they're more willing and apt to take that risk. But amateurs will take those same risks and not factoring that in. And again, that's a lack of belief in themselves and their abilities, and all of the other things that we talked about. And I think that this kind of moves in a little bit, and I know it's not everything, but moves in a little bit to the last one, and that's acceptance. Because I think once you accept and there's always room for improvement. Once you accept your abilities and you accept the decisions that you make along the way, you have an easier time, I believe, in playing this great game. And if you cannot accept your abilities and the limits of your abilities, and that doesn't mean, again, that there's not rooms for improvement, then I think what ends up happening is you're no longer focused. Am I right in that?
I think you're absolutely correct in that. There's a little bit of difference, though, in what we're talking about. The quality I think that you're talking about, and it's an important one, is commitment. And what I found over the years is, I call it, it's a lot like a prize boxer. And when I deal with the professional golfers and whatever, the prize boxer analogy is, if I'm going down, at least I'm going down swinging. In other words, I'm not going to sit there, not be prepared. I'm going to be in the game. I'm going to be fighting in the game to do what I believe. Commitment is a great energy in that it really is a highly, highly focused energy. And you're right. When we are committed to doing something, we're much more likely, if there is a mistake, to accept the mistake, as opposed to when we're not committed, we're not prepared, we don't have a plan, we're not feeling good, there's no belief, all the rest of the stuff, and then we still step up and hit the ball and then make a mistake. So a lot of the non-acceptance that I do see comes from these other qualities that are lacking in the pre-shot routine. So that when we can get a player really committed and feeling like, you know what, I've given it my best. I have prepared for this shot as well as I can, they're much more likely to accept. So the acceptance is something that takes place. It's a mind state that we want. Acceptance is really about getting over your mistakes quickly. We don't have to like them. That's an important difference. A lot of times when we talk about acceptance, an athlete will say, well, you just want me to be, to like it or be okay with it. And it's like, I want you to be okay with it, but just okay from the standpoint of you can't change it anyway. So you might as well just get over it quickly. And I would dare say that a lack of acceptance is probably the number one thing that I work with most junior and newer golfers. They just have a really hard time accepting their mistakes. And this whole idea of, that this is where I do believe that touring players are much, much, much better by and large. And we still have a number of them out there and we can see, well, these guys are not accepting too well. But by and large, most of them, they can hit a shot that doesn't quite go where they want it to, and they're going to accept it a lot easier than a lot of amateurs. Experience is one thing, and probably everything, but they just know not everything's going to go their way. So acceptance is really the ability to just get over quickly, and just kind of like I jokingly say too, please just get over yourself, because really. You weren't trying to hit a bad shot. It's not like you were trying to do something wrong. So why are you going down that road when it can't be any different than it is, and B, it's not helping you. If you're not able to move on quickly after a bad shot, this game will just chew you up and spit you out.
Well, I often ask. Some years ago, I started asking some of my students this because as I've mentioned many times on air before, I primarily deal with corporate types. So, I don't teach juniors and that sort of thing. So a lot of these guys, many of them have been playing for a number of years. And I always ask them, when you show up to the golf course, which are you? Are you a golfer or are you a baggage handler? And they'll stop for a minute and say, what do you mean a baggage handler? I said, well, when you show up to the golf course, are you the guy that you see at the airport that's pulling 2 or 3 bags, all their luggage and all their baggage? And what I mean by that, this is what a lot of our amateurs, the trap that they fall into, is just what you were talking about, is, bad shots or bad rounds. They're pulling all that baggage with them to the first tee.
Yeah.
And they're thinking about all of the missed opportunities. Even if they're playing the same course, they're thinking about all of that. So that's what I mean by by bringing their baggage, and that's my reference when I say it's a baggage handler, because if you're doing that, then going to your point, you're not accepting that, it's okay if you hit a bad shot.
Right.
Put it away,
Right.
learn from it,
Right.
figure out, not in the moment, but figure out later when you're, assessing your round, what it was that you did wrong. Was it just a matter of you hit a bad shot, or when you prepared for it, you didn't get the information you needed, or you didn't make an informed decision, or you weren't confident and accepting of the decision that you made at the time? And once you do that, and that's what the pros do, then they move on. They forget about it. They're not sitting there thinking, well, I hit a terrible shot. If you ever listen to an interview, and I never really realized this for many, many years, but somebody made this point. If you ever listen to the pros when they give an interview, even if they've had a bad round, certainly the seasoned ones anyways, you don't hear them talking about every bad shot they hit in that round.
No.
They're talking about, I played really – listen to Tiger. I mean, if you listen to how Tiger talks, even when he loses a tournament, he doesn't say, well, my putting sucked. He might reference that, he wasn't making as many putts, but he always reinforces it with positives in his game. And I've even heard him when he's, won the tournament by 12 shots, he'll come out and say, well, I wasn't playing my A game today. And people are scratching their head and thinking, what do you mean you're not playing your A game? You just beat the field by 12 strokes,
Right.
But they certainly acknowledge and they're realistic, but they're not dwelling on it. And that's why I say that. That's what I meant by baggage handlers. Many of our amateurs, it's just like they're wheeling up to the airport. They've got 3 or 4 bags of luggage with them, slumping it up to the golf, and that's what they're taking to the golf course with them. All the bad shots, all the bad rounds, right?
No doubt about it. And the 19th hole for the adults is certainly notorious. But one of the things that again, as a junior coach, and I would be out with a lot of juniors, and we would go to the junior luncheon or whatever, which was a lot of tournaments have a junior luncheon, and I'll be sitting at the table, and they'll be sitting there talking, and all they are talking about is their bad shots. And the funny thing, Ted, is that I always get a kick out of this because one of them will walk up to the table, and the question that they're feigning as interest is, how'd you do today? And the kid will say, well, I was doing okay until the 9th hole, and then I pumped it out of bounds, but it's all the talk is about the bad stuff that happened. Now the funny thing is that then the guy who asked him will chime in and top that story with one of his own. So it just turns into this giant contest where nobody's really listening to anybody anyway. They don't really care. They just want to top the stories. And this is, to me, is what amateur golf is filled with, is a lack of focus. The focus is on the bad stuff that happened rather than the good stuff that you want to move toward, and therein lies the difference in the mind game. The mind is either, and this is something that I work on very mindfully with the students I coach. The mind is always either focusing on what is or what it wants. And generally, those are not the same thing. So we're using the mind to observe and rehash, which is not a good thing, or we're teaching ourselves to use the mind to move toward a new desire. And that's what we really want to train athletes to do, is to want it more, to desire more, to learn what it takes to get to that level. And a lot of that means temporarily observing what you don't like, but you're not dwelling on it, and you are not talking about it, So I think that's a very important distinction right there, is that you're really focused. You're not spending time talking about what you don't like or what you don't want. It's just going to reinforce it in the brain, not going to move toward what you want, and it's not going to take performance where you want it to go. Just that really just is that simple.
Yeah, exactly. You want to walk up. You want to walk up to that first tee, with confidence and reassurance. And yes, realistically, we're all going to hit some bad shots along the way. But you want to walk up there with a clear conscience, and you want to walk up there with confidence and with a specific goal in mind. My goal is I'm going to define my targets as I go along, and I'm going to do my best to execute those shots based on what I know I'm capable and confident in doing. And I know that if there's situations that I'm not confident with, then I'm going to, assess it at the time, and I'm going to pick something that I know I'm going to be confident with. And it's just like picking a club. A lot of times when I've done a playing lesson, and I'll take somebody out there and we'll, have 150 yards, to the hole, and I'll say, well, what club are you going to use? And, I can tell one of two things happens. Well, I'm going to hit my 7-iron, or I'm going to hit my 8-iron, depending on the player, or even 6-iron in some cases. And they're very, very confident, and they step up there and they execute the shot. And even if the shot doesn't come off perfect, they made a decision based on their comfort level. And then there's other people, I'll see them to walk up and pull 4 or 5 clubs out of the bag, and they're sitting there scratching their head, not sure what to do. And they're looking at everything around them. And that's because they don't have a clear objective when they step up to that ball. And, they're bringing that baggage. They're thinking, well, I know when I played this yesterday, I hit a 7-iron, so I better use my 7-iron. Well, the conditions are different today. You got a wind in your face today. So you have to be aware, and as you point out, you got to be conscious of a lot of those variables, but you have to be confident, and you have to accept the decision that you make when you step over that ball. And if it does go in your favor, hey, great. And if it doesn't go in your favor and you hit it into the water, you hit it in the bunker, just accept, okay, it may not necessarily that you made a bad decision. It could have been outside elements. It could have been the wind gusted up and held the ball up in the air a little bit longer, and it didn't get the distance you needed. So there's a lot of variables, but don't overstate it and overthink it. Just accept the fact you didn't hit a good shot and move on to the next one. And that's what the pros do.
Right. And I agree with you. And it's going to happen. It is not a game of it's a game of adjusting, and you better be able to adjust off whatever the course throws your way on any given day. And you just have to be. And the thing that I see most often there again is that students trying to do things they don't really believe they can do, and then, to make matters worse, getting angry and upset. Now, it's one thing. It's one thing to be, it's some of the players out there, even on the tour, are what I call the swashbucklers, and I think Mickelson's a perfect case in point.
Yeah.
That just loved playing the risk. He kind of needed the risk, and other players are more methodical. That suits their personality types. But I often get asked, should I go for par 5? Should I not go for par 5? Should I try and carry the water? Should I not? I don't care what you do. I just want you believing that you can do what you're about to do. Do you really believe it? That's an important question. But the second thing is, are you willing to live with the consequences? Because if you can't live with the consequences, you don't want to be doing what you're doing. Then that's kind of just, your insides telling you, what, that is not the best choice. Let's choose something else. Because again, this is where I think the pros are masterful. The top level players are masterful. It's almost like a chess match or billiards is a great sport. You're thinking about the next shot. The quality though that again, as we're talking about the mind game, and when we talk about being in the zone, I would arguably say that the tour players are probably better at getting into the zone or being in the zone than most amateurs. That would probably go without saying. But to me, the quality there is that they are playing truly playing more one shot at a time. Whereas amateurs tend to, their minds stray more into the past or the future. So they're not what I would call in the now. And I think, I'm not even sure that most tour players would call it being in the now. It's what I call it as a mind coach. But there's really, when you're in the zone, there's no past or future. It's just you are just playing in this moment in time. And there again, it is the best way to fly. One of the things that I coach is that all negative thinking, and this is an important concept, but all negative thinking out there of any kind always surrounds thoughts about the past or the future. We've either dragged in what happened before that we don't like, and then usually just project those right into, and it could happen again. Bad things happen.
Right.
They did before, and they probably will again. or they're really anxious about the future. So in both scenarios, they're not effectively using the mind to stay really in the present moment. And just I'm very fond of saying, take care of this shot only. Take care of this shot, and it will all fall into place.
Well, and it just goes to say, the past is the past. It's already happened. The future has yet to come, and the only moment is now. And that's what you have to focus on. You're exactly right. Well said. What a great way to end the program with is with that thought. It's hard to believe, but boy, I'll tell you, that was a quick hour.
Well, when you and I do get together, we have a way of time does fly when we're together. So it's always a lot of fun being on the show with you, and we never seem to run out of things to talk about. So
no, exactly. Well, that's the important thing. You got to have things to talk about, and I think we do it very well. But Tim, I want to thank you as always for coming on, and I'll give you just a quick moment if you want to let the folks know the best way if they want to reach out to you, whether they're an aspiring tour player, whether they're a tour player, whether they're somebody that just needs help with their game in general, on some expert help in mind coaching. What's the best way that they can reach out to you?
Yeah, I just want to throw in one thing, and then I'm going to give the information. This is I think, what a lot of people miss out on. They think they've got to get to a certain level, good level, high level, before they can work on the mind game. And what I'm trying to encourage people is that, no, work on the mind game early and bring that mind to all the physical skills that you learn. And the whole process just goes so much easier and quicker. So don't wait to work on the mind game. Bring the mind game with you, and then you've got a set of skills that you can use on the courses you're developing as a player. But anyways, the website is peakperformancemindcoaching.com. And would love to do a lot of events throughout the country in terms of clinics. The nice thing is we don't just do theoretical. We actually show you in pre and post-shot routines how the work is done. I do a lot of private coaching, and that's the way to get a hold of me, and would love to work with anybody, and certainly believe that we've got some good stuff going and can help.
Well, perfect. Again, what a great way to end tonight's show, and I want to thank you as always, Tim, for coming on and sharing your thoughts and expertise, and I look forward to you the next time you're on Coach's Corner. I know you'll be coming back in a little bit to do that in the near future, and hopefully we will get some momentum going with the courses opening up, and I think this is a great opportunity for a lot of people who've been cooped up for a while. This is going to be the ultimate social distancing game because we don't have to be on top of one another. We're not body checking or tackling one another, or at least they shouldn't be anyways, unless they're having a really bad hole.
Good point. Yeah.
But Tim, thank you as always for coming on Golf Talk Live. It's a pleasure, and I look forward to you joining me again on the panel
and
on
pleasure,
future shows.
Thanks a lot. All right, buddy.
All right, you have a great evening.
Much. Take care. You too.
You're welcome. All right, good night. All right, that was my very special guest, Tim Kremer, the president and founder of Peak Performance Mind Coaching, LLC. Again, you can go to peakperformancemindcoaching.com to check out his website, all of his contact information there. And just a great guy, just knows that aspect of the game. And as he said, it's very important. We spend so much of our time on the range trying to hit the perfect shot. And a lot of times when we get out there and the shots don't go the way we want, we become very frustrated, and our level of frustration gets to a point where, as I pointed out earlier, many of you out there just decide that you don't want to play anymore as a result of it. And we put sometimes undue expectation on ourselves, and it just chips away at our desire and our belief in ourselves. So reach out to Tim. I think it's a good opportunity to learn really what's important about golf. All the top pros work with people like Tim on their game. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for you and I. Again, special thanks to Tim Kremer, and for joining me as my special guest, and Bill Abrams and Pete Buchanan for joining me on the Coach's Corner panel. I will see you next week with another panel and another great guest. God bless everybody. Be safe out there. And for those of you who are getting out to play some golf, take it easy. Do your social distancing, but have some fun. God bless everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this evening's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. Remember to tune in each week at blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. If you can't join us live, check out the on-demand section for previously aired broadcasts, or listen on any of the following social media platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, CastBox, TalkStream Live, and of course, Spotify. To get updates on future shows and upcoming guests, be sure to visit the show's Facebook page, Golf Talk Live Blog. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO. Remember to join me live each week for another great broadcast of Golf Talk Live. See you next time. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.